following program on Derana 24 is classified for general audience. It is intended for all ages. It contains little or no violence, no strong language, and little or no sexual dialogue or situations. We would like to remind our viewers that the views expressed in this program by our participating guests are solely viewpoints of them who take part, and does not reflect the views and beliefs of the Derana Media Network.
Welcome down to Gen XYZ right here on Derana 24. Well, today we bring to you a beautiful, beautiful subject, and this is, of course, something that, yes, as a youth, we need to actually talk about, especially if it's a flu. If it's something else, we don't really give concern to it, but cancer is a very sensitive topic, and that is something that we don't necessarily give too much attention to, even though we need to actually be aware of it. And that is exactly what we're going to have a conversation on today's Gen XYZ, located at this beautiful place, by the way. Thank you so much for hosting us. It's at Amazonero. This is located at 7 Degrees, Colombo 5, and it's a westernized, amazingly aesthetic place. If you do want to come by, bring your family as well and enjoy their Western fusions of food. It is definitely the spot that you can actually come and have a little bit of an edge to your experience as well. So thank you so much, 7 Degrees, for hosting us right here on Gen XYZ. Well, with that, we're in conversation with a beautiful individual, by the way. He is Buddhika. He's an amazing person, by the way, and as we have here, thank you so much for joining us today, by the way. So obviously, Buddhika is an individual from, he's got quite an experience in cancer. He's a doctor, but he specializes in stem cell transplantation at the Sri Lanka Cancer Institution. Well, he's got quite an expanded experience when it comes to cancer as well. So what better person to actually have than Buddhika? So thank you so much for joining us on Gen XYZ.
Thank you.
Now, Buddhika, obviously, something that I mentioned before as well is in terms of, cancer. Right? It's not airborne. It's not something that is regularized, especially to just get it into yourself, right? It's very different. How do you identify, okay, this is what's going to cause cancer, and what is it really? Because us as youth members as well, we don't really know exactly how we can actually get cancer, so we don't pay too much attention to it. So can you just grace us exactly what cancer is and how can we actually get it?
Well, Akhil, cancer is an uncontrolled and very abnormal growth and division of cells. So it can happen in any part of the body, in any tissue of our body. So it actually happens due to various reasons in the genetic material of these cells. So various genetic materials in our cells can alter in such a way that they divide without any control. So that's what causes cancer basically. When you go to a little bit of a depth of it, there are certain mechanisms in our cells to prevent this happening. There are natural processes which prevents this. But in a patient who has cancer, these mechanisms which disable cancer cells from originating are also shut off. So that results in the abnormal genetic mutations, we call them, to cause cancers and these abnormal cells to grow without any control. So that accumulation of abnormal cells and proliferation of these cells in any tissue, in any part of the body, will result in cancer.
Okay, so what you're saying is basically, even though we do have the natural forms of curing cancer, then why is it such a deadly disease? Why? Because even when we actually look at it, we're like, cancer, oh no, that's the end of your life, What is the base of that?
So different cancers in our body act very differently, and the genetic mechanisms that I talked to you about are different from various cancers, one cancer to the other. So the treatments are also different from one to the other. Some cancers grow very slowly, some cancers grow very fast. Their proliferative capabilities are different from one to the other. The cells have different forms, and their properties are also different. So the cancers behave differently from one to the other, depending on the tissue they originate. So as I told you, their growth is uncontrolled. So this is what making it very difficult to control and treat sometimes.
Right. So, doctor, what I wanted to ask you, another basic things is the fact that how is it commonly formed? Like, how can you commonly get cancer? What are the common forms of it?
So, in Sri Lanka, Akhil, we have had 38,000 new cases reported in 2021 alone. So this is for that particular year. So about 20,000 females and about 17,000 males have reported to have cancer in that particular year itself. So that is the latest data we have from the National Cancer Control Program of the Ministry of Health. So there are also about more than 1,000 children diagnosed with cancer in 2021. Coming to your question, how and why, there are certain causes which are very well defined, and that we have evidence for to prove that these are the causes for cancer. But most of the causes are unknown. The commonest cancers among males and females are different to each other. The most common cancers among females are breast cancers around the world, so as in Sri Lanka. And secondly, thyroid cancers, then colorectal cancers involved in the gut, and then ovarian cancers and the cancers of the cervix, so we call them cervical cancers. In males, the head and neck cancers are the most common ones, involving the lips, tongue, and the oral cavity.
Sorry, can you define that again? Why is it specifically the head and the... Can you define that? Because I didn't understand that part.
Well, I'll come to that later.
Okay.
Yes,
right.
Definitely. So first, the head and neck cancers involving the lips and the tongue and the oral cavity. The second one would be the lung cancers, involving the trachea, the bronchi, and the lungs. And thirdly, colorectal cancer, similar to the females. Fourthly, then prostate cancers, and so those are the commonest ones. So the difference is basically, now that males are more likely to consume alcohol, smoke more than females. So that may be the reason why the lip cancers, oral cavity cancers, and those involving the tongue and the lips are more common among males than females. So in females, of course, it's a breast cancer around the world, which is most common. So there are certain lifestyle changes, differences in lifestyle, and certain behavioral differences between the two genders, which make the commonest cancers different from between the two genders.
Right. So you mentioned the fact that breast cancer is something that is quite commonly found around the world as well. But what is the main cause of breast cancer? Because I think we've had this for the longest time, but we couldn't find a specific, a solution to it. There was no cure to it. What is the most common form of causing, breast cancer?
So one thing, Akhil, I had to correct you that we cannot actually say that there's no cure for cancer, especially breast cancer. There are lots of treatments available. It's treatable, and also if it is found in the early stages, it is curable. So there are patients who are living more than 20 years, 30 years sometimes, who have had breast cancer if it is found early. So that's one of the most important things that we have to understand, that these cancers can be prevented certain cancers can be prevented, and also if you find them early, early detection, which means early detection is very helpful in treating them and cutting them off at the early stages. Coming to the point that the causes of breast cancer that you asked, but very unclear, to be honest. The causes of breast cancer are not so clear cut, and there are no well-defined causes 1, 2, 3 that we can list out and enumerate.
Right. So that's something interesting that you mentioned, actually, where early detection is very important, right? But as a human being, you would never imagine yourself having breast cancer. You would never imagine yourself having the worst of diseases. So how do you identify that, okay, this is a thing that you can actually identify, okay, I do have breast cancer, but how do you identify that? How do you detect it earlier? To come and actually talk to a doctor and say, I have cancer. Do I have cancer? How can I get it treated? What are the treatments?
Well, that's a very good point, Akhil. So most of the people, particularly the youth, they don't think that they will get cancer.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you know what? Now, people who are below 50s, the likelihood of them getting cancer is lower than the old people, isn't it? So this cancer is known to cause problems. So it's a disease of elderly. That's what was known. But it's different now. So from 1990 to 2019, during these 3 decades, the number of cancers that affect people below 50 years have increased by 79%. That's a huge surge. So colorectal cancers in particular have now, they are seen among 30s, in 30s and 40s. And coming to the other point, how you would detect early. So we have to have an understanding of the signs and symptoms that we could recognize these cancers early. For breast cancers, for example, I'm not an expert in breast cancer, but I'm an expert in hematological malignancies. But just because you asked, so if you are to detect breast cancers early, you have to be vigilant and you have to do the self-breast examination. If you are a female, you have to do the self-breast examinations at least every month. So that has to be done systematically in a circular manner, starting from the nipple, going around the breast without missing any part of the breast. So touch, feel, and any lump should be detected by a female in the breast, and that should be brought to the attention of a medical practitioner. And also, if there's any discharge from the nipple, if there's any change in the skin, particularly
discoloration.
Yes, discoloration. Rather than discoloration, the surface of the skin can get something like an orange peel. It can change to something like an orange peel. So this is called puderange.
Right.
So that kind of an appearance on the breast surface of the skin of the breasts, or any asymmetry of the breasts. If you go in front of the mirror and you see that an asymmetry of the breast, that's also important. And people do believe that males do not get breast cancer, but there's a chance that a male can have a breast cancer. That understanding should also be there. So even the males have to be vigilant. There's a 1% chance of a male also get a breast cancer.
So something that is very interesting that you mentioned is the fact that you have to constantly, on a monthly basis, check your breast for cancer or lumps or whatnot. But there are so many forms of cancer, Bhuvika. There's so many forms of cancer. You take colon cancer, you take skin cancer. There's so many variations. How do you detect all of these? How do you actually detect it early to say, okay, I have skin cancer, I have breast cancer, I have colon cancer? How do you detect all of those?
So again, we have to have an understanding of abnormal symptoms, abnormal things. So we know what healthy is
and what is unhealthy.
Means.
Yeah, I like what you put
Well, for colorectal cancers, different symptoms can occur. For example, bleeding per rectum or bleeding with stools. There can be some blood on stools, or which is very unusual for a healthy person, isn't it? Or an abdominal pain, abdominal bloating, which can be persistent, and so these kind of things are early symptoms of colon cancer. So different cancers have different symptoms. Now, for example, in the mouth, you see an ulcer, an area which is abnormal, red, or under the tongue, on top of the tongue, inside the oral cavity. So these are symptoms which you should be vigilant of.
Okay, so you mentioning that confuses me so much, doctor, because see, I have had, mouth ulcers. Everyone has mouth ulcers because of the heat. Some people might actually be having digestive problems. You might eat so much junk and you might have a bloated stomach. You might even, pass stools that could definitely have blood in it as well. So how do you detect these?
So any of these symptoms can, now when we come to differential diagnosis of a particular symptom, the cancer doesn't come to the top. So say you have runny nose, the top of our list is you have viral flu. And then comes the other things at the end. So each of these symptoms do have different diagnoses. It's a constellation of diagnosis. It's not just one. So it's up to the patient to bring that complaint to the doctor, and it is up to the doctor to decide whether this is something very small, sinister, or something very serious. So if it is particularly, if these symptoms are persistent and does not resolve on its own within a small period of time, then that's when you have to bring these symptoms to the attention of a doctor.
So other tests basically is what you refer to?
Yes.
The problem there is, you obviously go with so many complaints because Sri Lankans are very, famous for all that. We go to the doctors, we're like, my head is aching, that is aching, do I have the worst of things? But obviously, it might not be the worst of things, right? But it could also be the worst of things or leading up to it. But the thing is, right now in Sri Lanka, right, around the world as well, we consume so much junk, Bhupika. We consume so much junk. We're talking about our processed food that is almost like plastic. It's not digestible at all. And that's on a regular basis. Even if you take like vegetables, it's chemicalized. It's all chemicalized. It's infused with so much things that are not humanly, edible or healthy for that matter. But we consume all of this on a daily basis. These are all cancer-causing elements. How do you avoid this? How do you understand, okay, this is not good. Wi-Fi is not good, but we have Wi-Fi all over. We're exposed to so much radiation. How do you identify all of this and know that, okay, this is going to live a balanced life? It's not going to expose me to the things that are the worst in cancer to whatnot. How do you identify those? How do you navigate those?
So two things. First thing, Wi-Fi and these mobile
devices,
they are not proven to cause cancer. That's
really?
a myth.
Really? Okay.
Second thing, you talked about processed food. That it has definitely a link to cancer. Now, I told you that there's a 79% increment in the amount of cancers among young people below 50s. So one of the most common reasons for this is thought to be processed food, ultra-processed food, or the westernized diet, which you would call it. Particularly in Western countries, USA, UK, Australia, so developed countries, this ultra-processed food has caused lots of a surge of cancers. Particularly, 14 cancers have been identified to have surged during the past few decades among people who are 30s and 40s. And 8 of these 14 are related to our digestive system. So there's a point in what you say. So probably processed food and processed food might be having a link with these digestive system cancers.
Exactly. I find it very interesting that you mentioned that, phones, that we very much live so closely, it radiates a lot. It's a machine, right? It radiates so much of, radiation, UV light and so much, but you surprisingly said something that is very shocking, I think, to everyone as well, that it's not cancer-causing. So I want to talk a little...
It has not been proven
it's not been
anywhere
proven,
in the world so
which
far.
Which means it could be a possibility.
Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit more on the other side as well, right here on Gen XYZ. Don't forget, we are located at 7 Degrees Park Road. Colombo 5 is exactly where it is. It's a beautiful place, by the way. If you do want to bring in your family and enjoy a little bit of dinner and enjoy some good memories, this is a place to make those memories. And with that, this is Gen XYZ with Dr. Bhupika. Thank you so much. We'll talk a little bit more on the other side. Welcome back to Gen XYZ. We're in conversation with Dr. Buddhika Somavardhana. He's a cancer doctor, and most importantly, we're in discussion with youth that needs to be in awareness of cancer. Well, that's a disease that we actually very much regret. We don't want it. We do not desire it, but it might be a possibility, especially with the regime that we actually have right now. We consume so much junk, and that was something that we spoke about on the other end as well. So we'll talk a little bit more. Now, Dr. Buddhika, we obviously spoke about, food. Food we actually consume. Junk food is definitely the primary cause of cancer. It could be colon cancer, it could be many, many other versions of cancer as well. But vegetables are also processed. They have so much chemicals in it. So how do you identify, how do you navigate all of this? You as a cancer doctor, you know all of the perks of things. That's the perk for you. How do you identify the things that are actually not good for you? And these are the things that are good for you. These are the organic things. Even organic things in Sri Lanka are not really organic. They have so many pesticides and so many chemicals infused into it. How do you identify? Because these are all chemicals that we can't process as humans. Those are the ones that cause lumps, cancer, and whatnot. So how do you navigate these?
It's very difficult, Akhil. It's very difficult to look at food and decide whether they are good or bad. These should come from the top hierarchy. The policies should be made by the policymakers in this country to prevent these kind of chemicalizations and to make sure that food is safe for everybody. And otherwise, we will see a surge of cancers. Now, I told repeatedly that the number of cancers are rapidly increasing among youth, particularly those around 30s and 40s. And majority of this are in the middle and low income countries like ours, where health infrastructure is not that great and food safety is not that great. So I think it's very difficult for us to identify as lay people, as normal people. It's very difficult to go to the market and identify non-chemicalized, organic vegetables as from chemicalized ones. So it should be from the policymakers and the people who are supposed to ensure food safety. That should come from
all the way from the top of the hierarchy.
Yes.
But I see the problem there as well, because they have to give it to the masses. The mass production is going to take some time. It is going to cost a lot as well. So chemicalizing many of these things are the way to go. But the problem is it's causing a rapid increase and rapid surge in the youth of Sri Lanka facing cancer. And that's not a good thing at all. What are the stats presently in terms of the youth having cancer?
So as I told you...
Specifically, what are the types of cancer as well for the youth only for Sri Lanka?
Yes. It's again the same cancer. So if we divide the incidence of cancers among different age groups do have different cancers. Like in the majority of cancer, the hierarchy of cancers are different from different age groups. Now, for example, children do have very different types of cancers which are common among them. Leukemia, lymphoma, cancers of the brain and the nervous system are more common among children. But in the youth, lymphomas and leukemias, which is my subject, those cancers are more common among teens and in 20s and 30s. And as I told you, the colorectal cancers and other cancers, especially the lung cancers, are now seen more common among 30s and 40s. And when we come to females, of course, again, around 30s and 40s, breast cancer is still the most common cancer.
Something else off the camera that you mentioned as well is the fact that this month is breast cancer, and we're celebrating breast cancer as well, and that's very important that we actually bring awareness to that as well, especially amongst the females of Sri Lanka. But something that you also mentioned is, it's very common in Sri Lanka, especially for the youth within these ages, to get, leukemia and blood cancer and so much more. But there has to be a little bit of a, sort of like a cause that is causing all of these surges. You can't just get, blood cancer. Is it hereditary? Is that a part of it as well? Or is it there has to be some element that's causing these things to surge. What is that element?
So for blood cancers, the causes are not very well defined. For most of the cancers, the causes are not very well defined. But for this surge of cancer that is seen among the youth, there can be multiple causes. We can't point finger at just one cause. As we discussed earlier, processed food could be one, lack of sleep, sedentary lifestyle, obesity, smoking, and alcohol consumption, which is very prevalent in certain parts of the country, certain parts of the world as well. So these kind of causes may be playing a role. So it's not a single cause, it's multifactorial definitely. And also for different cancers, the causes can also be different.
Wow. It still gives me the question of, okay, am I doing something that could even cause cancer? That's the ideation that we have. But there are a lot of TikTok videos. There's a lot of Instagram videos that have saying if you want to avoid getting cancer, you have a glass of water with ginger and lime and honey and all of those little different myths. Is there like a certain thing, because we can't avoid consuming junk, we can't avoid consuming vegetables and fruits that are infused with chemicals. Is there a certain, a drink that we can actually like consume or something? Like, so many TikTok videos as well, like ginger, honey, lemon, and all of that, that would cleanse our system from all of the things that we consume. Is there something like that?
Yes.
There is. Interesting.
Water.
Okay.
All
right.
That's the best
I like
drink.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
Water. But even water is chemicalized, isn't it? We've got, everything is so, it's chemicalized, and that's the problem.
Well, we can filter it and then have it. I think water is the best ailment or the best drink that we can ever have.
Yeah, I love that you said that, honestly. So in that note, of course, Sri Lanka is actually a very tropical country, right? We have quite a lot of sun. Our weather is very, very off. Sometimes we have a whole bunch of sun literally like raising into Sri Lanka, and then we have rain the next second, right? So the UV rays that's actually exposed to Sri Lanka or Colombo specifically is quite heavy, because we have less, trees around as well. We have too many buildings. We have, buses. We have so much exhaust gases that we breathe in on a daily basis. So even though we do have melanin, we do have the natural sunscreen, is it very important that we actually wear sunscreen to avoid, skin cancer?
Yes, definitely. It's important that we wear sunscreen to avoid UV rays. Although skin cancers are not as common in Sri Lanka and this part of the world, for example, compared to Australia, where the ozone layer is damaged and there's lots of skin-related cancers. Still, it's very important that we apply sunscreen to protect our skin. Although it's not common, it's seen among Sri Lankans as well. Although we have the protective layer of melanin.
Melanin, exactly. So that does that really mean the fact that even because if you take like skincare products as well, they're not really healthy for your skin. It could cause a relevant case of cancer and whatnot. Does that mean that that could also cause skin cancer?
So this is a huge problem, Akhil, in our country. So these cosmetics might contain lead. They may contain mercury. So there are certain products which have to be avoided, and that also should come from hierarchy, from policymakers, to avoid these kind of products from getting into the market. So I think there's a safety network, but still I think it has to be strengthened to prevent these products from coming into the market.
Right. Are you, as a doctor, because I know you've been in the industry for a very long time, are you actively making sure, or are you doing something, projects to whatnot, to make sure that this thing is being made, the policies are taken into consideration?
So, I represent the Sri Lanka College of Oncologists. I'm the secretary of the College of Oncologists. So we are an advisory body to the ministry regarding the cancers and equalization of our resources to make sure that everybody in the country have the access to all the important
Medications
high-end
and-
medications,
yes.
as well as other technology, medical-wise. So we have discussed in length about these things in different forums. I think it's time for us to have a proper discussion and to take it forward to make sure that these kind of policies are strengthened and taken forward.
Right. And from this process of you know, putting up proposals to so much, has anything actually gone forward, or something that you would expect it to happen?
Unfortunately, not yet.
Yeah.
Not much.
I think that is the importance, you know, especially because we need to save our youth, we need to save our country as a whole, and that starts with the policymakers. And if the proposals are being sent, that is what has to be considered to actually make sure that all of these things are done. Something else, Doctor, that I wanted to actually touch base on as well is in terms of, you know, so many preventative methods we actually are actively putting ourselves into. You know, we prevent ourselves from, you know, getting a contagious disease. It could be STDs, it could be so many other factors as well. But cancer is something that we don't necessarily do to prevent. We don't even think about it from the top of our minds, to be quite honest and frank. I don't think about cancer. I would probably be like, I'm not going to be one of those unlucky ones that would, you know, get cancer, because that's the ideology that goes around, especially in Sri Lanka as a norm-filled country. How do we break that norm? How do we break that stigma, especially, you know, outskirts of Colombo? When you tell your parents, I think, you know, I feel something, I feel like there might be a lump, or it might be cancer, your parents or the culture of Sri Lanka is going to be, don't even think about it. You know, you're just being too strained on yourself. Don't. It's not good to even think like that. It's going to be, you know, it's so stigmatized if you think about it. How do you break that stigma? How do you break that norm and actually, you know, especially amongst the youth as well, and come out and say, hey, I need to focus on cancer as well? How do you break that?
First thing, Akhil, I think we have to understand cancer is another disease. It's not just, you know, the second thing is that it's treatable. There are lots of treatment, and majority are treatable, and also a large proportion of cancers are curable as well. So we should not be afraid of this stigma, and we should make sure that whenever we come across a symptom which could be an early sign of cancer, we should bring it to the attention of a medical practitioner. So I think that would break this cycle.
Hopefully, you know, the people actually have, you know, the sort of like the guts to actually come forward and make sure that they prioritize cancer, because especially right now in Sri Lanka with the surge that's taking place as well, it's quite scary. From the stats that you actually mentioned as well, it's very, very scary. And to think, you know, anyone that's actually walking on the street, something that they're actually doing wrong, from the consumption of food to whatnot, could cause cancer. So that little thing in itself is all a ball of scariness. But we'll talk a little bit more on the other side as well, because I want to touch base on something a little bit more important with regards to the youth. But right here on Gen XYZ is exactly where you're tuned in with Dr. Buddhika. Well, thank you so much for doing this with us. We'll jump into a short commercial break. We'll come back right here only on Other Derana 24. Welcome back to Gen XYZ right here on Other Derana 24. Well, we're in conversation with a beautiful soul, by the way. This is Dr. Buddhika. Thank you so much for actually doing this with us right here on Gen XYZ. We were talking in the lines of, you know, cancer. Cancer is quite a deadly disease. We don't show too much effort into it because we don't think it's to be important. It's not an important thing. It's not airborne. But right now in Sri Lanka, as youths, we're facing quite a surge in the number of cancer cases. And sadly, as we actually discussed about it as well, there is more, the food that we consume to everything that we do on a lifestyle basis is all leading up to cancer. So what is the solution to this? How can we sort of avoid it, and what are the awareness aspect of things as well? So that is exactly why we've got him to really, enlighten us all as to how we can prevent, cancer in the minimal way that we can actually do. You mentioned early detection in the previous segment as well. Early detection when it comes to, especially when it comes to, whether it's lymphobia, whether it's, your lungs to whatnot, I feel like lung cancer right now is quite a heavy thing as well, because especially amongst the Colombo region of people, we barely have trees. We cut down trees on a regular basis. So we have so much vehicles in Sri Lanka, especially Colombo, by the way, that exhaust a lot of, greenhouse gases that are not good for us. So us breathing this in, do you think, even though, during the period of COVID, we wore face masks, do you think we need to continue wearing face masks even, by walking on the roads to prevent cancer?
Well, that's not that we can definitely recommend Akhil for obvious practical reasons, but this environmental pollution must be playing a role in lung cancer. But more than that, smoking plays a huge role. And also in this country, beetle chewing has also been known to cause cancers in the mouth and the oral cavity. So I think just by wearing face masks would not be sufficient. Avoiding smoking is the first thing. Of course, the products of combustion, the fuel combustion must be causing a lot of pollution, and that may be related to lung cancers. But I would say the first and foremost thing should be to prevent lung cancers should be avoiding smoking.
Avoiding smoking, I feel like that is also a primary
Yes.
cause. But at the same time, even if you don't smoke, if you're passively smoking, would that be
Definitely,
a result
yes.
of it as well? Wow. So then the majority of it is to basically refrain
Yeah.
from anyone smoking or you smoking per se as well. So I feel like another factor that actually contributes there as well is blood cancer, which you mentioned. So blood cancer is something that we, very commonly find, very unfortunately, in Sri Lanka and around the world as well per se. How do you sort of, you specialize in blood cancer as well. How do you sort of, navigate if you have blood cancer? Is it hereditary, or is it something that, out of all of the contributions to it, you actually get diagnosed with blood cancer?
So one question asked by a lot of people is that whether cancers are hereditary. So a small fraction of cancers are hereditary, comes from one generation to the other. But as I explained to you earlier, all of the cancers have a genetic basis. Doesn't mean that it comes from one generation to the other. So the majority of lymphomas, leukemias are not hereditary, but there's this genetic basis for any cancer for that matter. So lymphomas and leukemias and myelomas, these are the blood cancers. They originate from the blood forming cells in our bone marrow. So bone marrow is where our blood cells are formed. Red blood cells, white blood cells and platelets. So when something goes wrong in the genetics of blood forming cells, they are originating cells, the stem cells we call them. When something goes wrong in these cells, they form blood cancers due to uncontrolled abnormal growth and proliferation of these cells. That's how that they result in. And also the lymphatic system can also be involved in certain blood cancers, for example in lymphomas. So blood cancers are those that involve the blood forming cells in our bone marrow, blood and lymphatic system.
Right. And does exercising on a regular basis, because they do say, I don't know if it's a myth or not, but you can actually clarify that to me, because doctor, they say, exercise is very important, but if you do have blood cancer, if you have any kind of cancer, you, in a small base of things, you can actually remove it completely by effectively exercising. Is this a truth, or is it a falsified connotation of things?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, sedentary lifestyle plays a role in the surge of cancers that we see among the youth.
Right.
But a person who has cancer, I don't think exercising would make any difference when you get cancer. After you get cancer, it's a treatment that we usually recommend, but exercising is definitely helpful for anybody for that matter, but it doesn't cut off cancer.
It doesn't cut off cancer, even
But
at
it
the early
helps
stages.
preventing cancer.
Right.
Yes.
How does it prevent helping cancer in terms of working out, like exercising on a regular basis?
So physical exercise has been shown to reduce particularly non-communicable diseases like diabetes, hypertension, cardiac diseases, and also cancer. So it's a very well-known factor.
Is it because you're burning things out, and the fact that your body's refreshing naturally? Is that the cause of things, or is it a different?
Yes.
It is. Yes. Okay. See, I actually understand that as well. Doctor, speaking in the lines of that, I know you're actually doing something very interesting. Actually, this is for the first time in Sri Lanka. We were talking off camera as well. Can you tell us exactly what this is? Because this is actually going to impact Sri Lankans quite heavily when it comes to cancer as well. So tell us exactly what this is.
So I represent the Sri Lanka College of Oncologists. The Sri Lanka College of Oncologists is the academic, the professional body which unites the oncologists, the hematolo-oncologists, the pediatric oncologists, the surgical oncologists, as well as the gynecological oncologists. So we have about 200 members. So every year we have the annual academic sessions. So this year we have the 21st annual academic sessions. So we have a very vast array of topics covered this time, and that helps promote collaborations and also foster collaborations and promote the knowledge sharing among the professionals. And we make sure that our professionals, our fraternity is up to date, so that we can offer updated treatments for our patients. So in that way, it helps our patients in our country. And also this time, we have a large number of foreign faculty joining us physically. Around 20 people are joining from different parts of the world, from USA, UK, Italy, Singapore, India, and UAE. So there are about 50 local experts also joining us this time. And for the first time in Sri Lanka, we have stem cell transplantation workshop also happening in parallel to this annual academic congress, annual academic sessions. So that is as a pre-congress session on the 10th of October at Hotel Galadari. So this is endorsed by one of the world's largest bone marrow transplant associations, the EBMT, European Society of Blood and Marrow Transplantation. So they are endorsing our Congress, and we have also signed an MOU with the EBMT. So that will signal that we have a long way to go, and the collaborations will be in the long run helpful to our fraternity, the hemato-oncologists in particular. And we are also formulating one alliance, BMT Sri Lanka, so bone marrow transplant in Sri Lanka, uniting all the specialities, all the experts in the country who are interested in stem cell transplantation or bone marrow transplantation, which is a very growing topic in Sri Lanka at the present.
Wow, I'm quite excited for it as well, because I feel like, you know, a lot of the projects that, which you mentioned previously as well, the fact that this particular project that you made had quite a lot of challenges in itself, you know, in terms of even doing the project. Because the thing in Sri Lanka is the fact that when you want to actually, you know, bring a subject that is important out there, they don't accept it. They don't want it. They're like, you know, it's going okay now. Let's just stick to it and let's just go with the flow. So don't bring anything new to have a solution to it. So I'm glad that you're doing this, and thank you very much for joining us today on Gen XYZ as well to really have this conversation about it. But in the lines of, you know, cancer and doing things that actually really does matter, has there been a circumstance, because your job pertains of, you know, giving a solution to someone that is suffering very drastically, has there been a circumstance where, you know, as a doctor, some patient comes to you with a very, very bad case of things, especially in cancer, that is actually going to, you know, send shockwaves through your backbone? Has there been a circumstance like that?
Well, that happens almost every day.
Every day, yeah.
So we'll see lots of patients. The National Cancer Institute of Sri Lanka has the largest number of patients. We have patients from all over the country flowing in and we have about 15,000, 16,000 cases being registered every year, and this is a day-to-day situation for us. There are cases which are really gone to very late stages, and sometimes it's unsalvageable. So it makes us very sad that if this could have been presented, if these patients could have presented to us earlier, we could have prevented and saved their lives, prevented these circumstances. So I think, yeah, so this happens every day. So my message to everybody is that if there are abnormal symptoms that you come across, you have to bring it to the attention of a medical practitioner as soon as possible without waiting and wasting time.
And so I think the abnormal things that happen is what you're referring to, as opposed to normal things that happen. In terms of, there are other factors as well, which I feel like testicular cancer is something that I want to touch base on as well, because that's something that happens. Ovarian cancer, reproductive cancer, if I put it that way. How do we prevent things like that? Because obviously they say, heavy radiation around these sensitive areas could actually lead up to having cancer. How do you avoid these as well?
So exposure to unnecessary radiation, particularly ionized radiation, is a known factor which can cause blood malignancies as well as all of these malignancies, in particular ovarian and other testicular malignancies. To prevent that, you should have an understanding where these radiations are and how to avoid that. So it's
Where
something.
do you commonly find these radiations?
So in radiation facilities, in X-ray and CT scanning, and so unnecessary radiation exposure in those medical facilities or investigations is also bad. So avoiding those should be the key aspect. But of course, certain individuals have to work in these facilities, but they take the risk. And there are certain ways to gauge the risk so that at a certain level, we do not allow them to work in these facilities. Particularly pregnant women, they are not allowed to work in these facilities for obvious reasons, not only cancer. So this is how we should, I think, have to prevent these kind of
as well. I love that you mentioned the fact that, I think we touched based on all of the cancers in general and how you can sort of avoid it as well. In one sentence, as we are coming to an end of Gen XYZ, one sentence, Doctor, what would you say to the youth watching right now as well? How can you prevent or avoid the heavy stages of cancer?
So unfortunately, even the youth, they are presenting at later stages, particularly the colorectal cancers and breast cancers. Unfortunately, they present at later stages as well. So to prevent that, recognize these symptoms, any lumps, any abnormal symptoms. So you have to be vigilant about these symptoms and present yourself to a medical practitioner early. So that helps us identifying these cancers at an early stage and to cure them if possible. That would be the message that I would like to convey to everybody who's watching.
All right, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Budhika, for actually doing this with us. And this concludes the end of this episode on Gen XYZ, talking in the importance in the lines of cancer awareness as in general. Well, with that, we've got to give a mega thank you going out to this beautiful location, by the way, 7 Degrees, that's located at Park Road, Colombo 5. And in case, I feel like the best thing about this place, to be honest, besides the 3 different concepts they've got for you, is the 360 digital experience. It's a dining experience with an absolutely brilliant base of things. We're talking about, different lights coming through, and it is an experience that you can have with a very loved one or one of your special ones as well, that you want to give them and cater and make their lives even more enriched as well with this absolutely beautiful dining experience. Don't forget, again, they're located at Colombo 5. Park Road is exactly where they are. 7 Degrees, thank you so much for being a part of Gen XYZ. And with that, if you do miss out on an episode as well, we are available on youtube.com/otherthaninenglish. English. And thank you for watching. We'll be back with a different episode right here on Gen XYZ.